For those of you who have just joined, this is the schedule for the Cut Flower Short Course at the Kentucky Fruit and Vegetable Conference. That'll be on January 4th next year in Bowling Green. You can scan the code to see that registration, or we'll be pushing it out online in the next few days. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Alexis.
Awesome. I'm trying to make sure my screen is pulling up and being happy. So thanks you all for joining us. Like Dakota said, that fruit and vegetable web in person. We love in person these days, right? Conference is excellent. We had some great people. We had full rooms last year, and it was a great experience to be able to meet a lot of people. So if you're new, or maybe you're not new, but you're looking to make some connections with other cut flower growers, be able to ask some questions of some really excellent specialists who will be there. We really encourage you all to come. There's a great time during lunch, and we just kind of get to chat and get to know each other. So really highly recommend that. And yeah, I'm really excited tonight because we have the wonderful Lyndsay Biehl, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of because she is famous around the cut flower parts for all the awesome things that she does. But she owns Wildroot Flower Co. in Ohio. And she is also one of the hosts of the Dirt on Flower podcast. And Lyndsay is a wealth of knowledge because she has a wealth of horticulture background on not just flowers, but you've done kind of a little bit of everything, right, Lyndsay? So we're just really excited to have her. And I know I'm personally taking some notes and this business guru over here, but I'm gonna let her take it away and share her knowledge. I think we've got a poll that might be popping up here soon. So if you see that on your screen, that'll help her get some info and kind of tailor her talk as we go. And then we'll have a few things at the end for you all. So stick around, don't jump off early. So we've got some stuff for you, but go ahead, Lyndsay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let me get my screen going. This is so cool, this poll. We need to like,
it's real time.
Is this a Zoom thing?
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome. Help me. I love the help me's. Okay, let me do share screen. All right. So tonight we're going to be talking about just budgeting on the farm. And it's a topic that is very, I think it's one of the most important topics that we should be talking about on our farms. And as flower farmers, we love talking about flowers, rightfully so. But I think the most important thing to talk about when it comes to our farms is profitability, and how we're getting there is through creating a budget and how to stick that. So I'm going to walk you through my process today. So just a little intro about myself. So I have, won't spend a ton of time on this, but I want to just tell you a little bit myself and then my farm to kind of give you some reference on, to help you kind of see where I am and with, where I got started and kind of where I am now. So I have a background of landscape horticulture from Ohio State, and like Alexis said, I worked many years. This is my 25th year in the industry, but I did a lot of landscape, arboretum work, a lot of horticulture-based work, and then transitioned into flowers 8 years ago. So my farm is located in Marietta, Ohio, right on the West Virginia border, last little town in Ohio before you get into West Virginia. We have 3 acres of field crop production. We have 3 high tunnels, 5 employees, sometimes 6 peak season, and 3 full-time, 2 part-time. Our floral sales go from March through October, sometimes November, if we can get it with mums. And just sort of a breakdown of what our sales are. So this is looking at 22. So from 22, I haven't rounded out 23 yet. But our breakdown percentages. So these are our percentages. You can kind of see here what my total revenue, different enterprises are. So bulb sales, that would include dahlia tuber sales, tulips, ranunculus corms when we sell those. Our CSA sales, they're about 15% of our pie. Our U-pick, we have an on-farm stand. We've always had an on-farm stand. This year, we put in a legit flower stand. So I'm anxious to sort of see how those numbers shake out this year and how this pie sort of, it shifts. We do workshops. They're a big part. Our farmers market is huge for us. Last year was about 18% of our total revenue for the year. Our wholesale, our weddings, and then our Christmas business. And so when I'm looking at working on my budget and going through setting sales goals, these are all the things that I'm sort of looking at and considering. Let me get back to say, I live in a small town, so we have about 8,000 people. The surrounding area is about 28,000. The PYO, so that pick your own, from 21 to 22, and I'm going to talk about trends in your business. 21 to 22 increased 300% from 21 to 22. From 22 to 23, I did not see that same percentage of growth. The previous year, I think it was about 80% growth in there. So I will be updating that. I'm happy to share that at some point when I get those numbers. And as we're going along, if you guys have questions too, pop in and ask the questions. The poll's coming back so far of everybody who have voted. We've got 63% are saying help me, 37% saying, they're fairly confident. We've got nobody that's saying you got it and you love spreadsheets. I hope I convert you all by the end of this. Okay. So here's what we're going to talk about this evening. So just to create a plan for success, we're going to talk about creating a solid foundation through record keeping, projected sales and setting goals within your business, budgeting expenses, and creating good habits. And then we're just going to do a little overview for you at the end. So here's the dumpster fire that I want to talk about that started all of this for me. I was a hot mess in my business, and it was on the finance side. The business was growing. I felt like I was making a lot of money for working full-time off the farm. This is my, I've just been off the farm full-time on the farm 2 years now. So at the end of the day, at the end of the year, I was feeling super defeated. It looked like, and we all know sometimes from taxes to what was actually in the bank, everything looked different. It didn't make sense to me. And accounting was an area in school and college that I just struggled with. And so I really put my head in the sand and I just sort of ignored it. I was flying by the seat of my pants. And at the end of the year, I was looking at, we had hit 6 figures, and I was like, where is it? Where is this money? And how am I ever gonna quit my job and farm full time if this is what's left at the end of the year? And so I had excessive expenses. My solution for most of my problems that I had on the farm was just to throw money at it, because I had it in the season, was probably spending more on labor than I should have. I was really disorganized with my finances. I had a overproduction of crops, which was ultimately costing me money with labor, with fertilization, planting in general, just maintaining a space. And I had a really low take-home salary, which at the time was 0. And I was not paying myself for my business, and I had cash flow issues. I mean, I was a mess with this. And this system that I'm going to talk to you about today, what I did today, these simple steps, is allowed me to double my top line revenue and increase my profit margin just in one season. So I doubled my top line and I increased my bottom line 25% in just the first year of doing it. And so that to me, I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So then the second year I did it, I increased my top line another 25%. So when you start to grow and you're growing, it's difficult to continually to double. So 25% to me was great. But what I really focused on was I increased my profit margin by 75% and I doubled my take-home salary in one season. And so I started that next year, I was like, I have to start paying myself. And so this is where I was at. It was not that long ago that I was really what I considered it to be like very financially strapped in cash. And so when I was in college, I've shared this before on the podcast or in different talks I've done, but I was in college and they would say, I was in horticulture school and they're like, well, if you're doing it to get rich, you're in the wrong business, you know, and you always hear poor, dumb farmer and he's broke and, you know, you're never going to get ahead. And the only way to make money in farming, you know, to be a millionaire in farming is start with $1 million, you know, all these things that you've heard. And I just couldn't sign up. I just could not sign up for that school of thought. I thought I love what I was doing more than anything. I have been, you know, when I was 16, I started working at a garden center and I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. And so there has to be a way to make money at it. And so I read a book called Profit First. And some of what I do run my business off of a profit first model. But the things I'm going to talk to you today is that I'm not talking profit first, but this is a quote from Mike Michalowicz from that book. A financially healthy company is a result of series of small daily financial wins, not one big moment. Profitability isn't an event, it's a habit. And that mindset shifted for me. It was when I realized that this whole, you know, I was in school, I was a sprinter. And if you've heard me talk on the podcast, I talk about efficiency and speed, and I just don't like things that take a long time. And so when I read this, I was like, oh, like I just want a quick fix. But the truth is, this is kind of a marathon and it's all small wins. And I think any big thing that we're going through in life and with finances, we have to sort of slow it down and look at that. And for some of us, that's really easy. For me, it was a difficult thing. So that's the mindset I'm going to ask you to sort of carry in when we're looking for this talk this evening. So building a solid foundation to me with anything, with any a business, a relationship, anything you're doing, is that solid foundation. And I think within a business, for me, that's record keeping. And for what I have found is keeping things simple is the key for consistency. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed, especially when we're new in business and we're trying to figure out a crop plan. And, you know, maybe it's your very first year and you don't even have you don't have sales records, you haven't been doing it, and you should have been doing harvest records and all of these things. So I'm always going back to keep it simple. And I do it still with myself now, even with being in business this many years, I still look at, like, do I still need to be doing this particular thing this way? Can we trim some of the fat off to make it more lean or simplify the process? So we can get stuck in analysis paralysis where I can remember asking certain questions about like pinching zinnias and like all these things where I was just really over analyzing things. And I was doing that all throughout my entire business, including with the finances. I've had people recently, when I've done coaching with people or consulting, and they'll say, I don't know, we get along fine, not, measuring anything. And I always kind of push back and say, if you want to grow your business and you want to make changes, like, how are you going to know if our gut lies to us sometimes? It's like, how are you going to make changes that actually benefit your business and benefit you? Because we're all in this to make money. If you're doing this as a hobby, that's great. You can enjoy it in a very different way. But if you're sitting in here and you're learning about budgeting, I'm assuming you want to make money and you want to make the most money you can. And, I think sometimes we're even afraid to say that, but that's why I show up for work every day. It's why I go through these things, is because ultimately I want to have a comfortable life, and do it while doing something that I absolutely love as well. So if you aren't measuring it, you can't manage it, and you can't make educated decisions moving forward if you aren't actually tracking it. So only collecting information that helps me make business decisions. That's what I decided. I read lots of books, farm budgeting books. I listened to farming, accounting podcasts and all kinds of crazy stuff, not even farm related things, just in general. And my head was really swirling with okay, I have to look at what worksheet every week and this and that. And so I just trimmed it all out and I said, okay, what are the things that I really need to track to make decisions for next year, or even in year, current year decisions? And so the first thing I started with is, if we're talking collectively, by looking at creating a budget to get you the most money at the end of the year. That's what the whole point of this is I would like to see sales records, and I'm going to show you very basic sales records. So if you don't use QuickBooks, which is what I use, if you're not using an online accounting software yet, an Excel spreadsheet, the very first year I was using it on pieces of paper, so it can be very, very simple. It doesn't have to be that, yes, I'm going to talk about P&L sheets and expense reports, but if you're not there, I didn't start there. I started with it on an Excel spreadsheet and on a piece of paper. So sales records, anything that comes into you, any sale you're making. And I generalized it in the very beginning. Now I'm very specific, but it was very generalized. Like, I made this much at farmers market. I sold this much to florists in this month. Expense records. So money coming in, money coming out. Expense records are very, very important. Farms eat money, and knowing where that money goes is your job to figure it out and to keep track of it. Harvest sheets. So a simple harvest sheet, I'm going to show you mine. I'm going to show you my shrink sheet. And so harvest sheet is anything that we pull out of the field. And so that gives me an idea of what we're actually pulling out of the field. My sales record is going to show me what's actually getting sold. And then my shrink sheet is anything that gets wasted. And if you've been around me or heard me talk, you hear me talk about shrink all the time. Shrink, waste, it is super, super important because it is so eye-opening to what we actually get rid of and pitch in our business. So sales record. So here is just a very basic, this is from like 2017 stuff that I've pulled off to kind of show you like what June sort of would look like. This was a very basic, I wrote who paid me, kind of, like I even had like online sales that I did a workshop and sold like $3,000 worth of tickets. A general description, florist sales that we had sold, farmers market, kind of like what-ish did I sell. This is a very simple version of this. I didn't want to show QuickBooks because I didn't know where everybody was with this. But I'm happy to answer questions at the end relative to this. But this is how simple this process can be in tracking what sales you've had. And online sales where we sold CSAs. And then that would have been like a June sales record for me. So very, very basic. I'm doing this for every single month. So same for expenses. So I had down there, like, where was I? How did I pay? When did I pay? These were just certain ones I pulled off. This was just my continuing education category. So I had them broke down. So this is where it had a flower conference. I had gone to a friend's house or a friend's workshop that she had with Passion Flower Sue. Conference fees. So this was just one category of an expense, and I'm going to get into those expenses, but super, super simple. Here's an example of our harvest sheets. So we have the flower variety, we have the week number, how many bunches we pulled. We just keep going out with that throughout the whole year. We have it now on a laminated sheet. So we have this piece of paper printed, we have a spring crop, and we have a summer fall one, and we just write how many bunches we have down, and then I punch it right into Google Sheets, and then it helps load into a spreadsheet for me that I use in January and February. This is my shrink sheet. So here's just a super, again, simple, this is what week it was, this is what it was, this is what we pitched, this was an estimated cost. My estimated cost is a retail cost, wholesale cost. What did I pitch? And I always put like a reason. I always also write things down where, we had sunflowers, Benson's Choice, 3,000 seeds, poor germination, tilled it and reseeded it. It's not necessarily anything. It's just a mental note for me to know, like, we had estimated time in this. Same with some of the stuff that, peonies blowing out in the field, that kind of stuff. That's just an example of what we do, but we do it every week, and it's just sort of a habit. So to start this process here, I always start my budgeting process in the year with sales projections and goals. And for me, setting sales projections for what do I think this next upcoming year is going to look like is super important. It gives me a really good understanding of my overall finances. It simplifies my planning process for the whole year, and it becomes easier as you've done it. You've got years of data being built. When you start out, you're going to be like, I don't know, I'm making this crap up. And you probably are. And that's where I started too. But then you get this system going, and it becomes easier to reference these things year after year. And it helps in the budgeting process for me. So just setting these projections and the sales goals, it makes it easier to get loans if you're looking to get a loan. So creating sales projections, I look at all of my potential sales opportunities. So I take all of my business enterprises, and those would be that little pie chart that we looked at. So write down absolutely everywhere that you sell. Do you sell to CSAs, farmers markets, coffee shops, wherever it is? And you're looking at all opportunities that you think could come your direction that year. Reviewing data if you have it from a previous year. Again, if you don't get hung up on this. Educated guesses for a new grower is perfectly fine. You can just, and again, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Go, okay, I'm going to be at market 10 weeks. I'm going to set a goal to sell 15 bouquets a week. That's 150 bouquets at how much money, and give yourself sort of that buffer. So when I sit down for the year, so like for this year, for example, we were looking at our UPIC, and I had a certain number that I was looking to hit for our UPIC. And I went in and kind of said like, okay, in the past, we've sold this much at a Sunset UPIC. We're going to do a Flower Fest this year, and I'm going to be selling for 6 or 7 more hours than I normally do. And I tried to hit a goal for that financially. So that went into my sales for the year. So determining those realistic sales goals. So I had to sort of consider multiple outcomes to this. Okay. So weather with what we do is huge, especially with agritourism, farmers markets, you can have a total bust. It could be, weather dependent with our crops, all those things. So I give myself a little bit of a margin for error. Looking at setting realistic goals. So look at market saturation. Are you saying you're going to open a UPIC this year, and there's a UPIC 10 miles up the road from you, and you've got this lofty goal? I'm not saying not to do lofty goals, but I'm just saying give realistic when you're looking at sales projections for you to set finances, your finances off of. I'm looking at the economy, and then business trends. And I am looking at, for us, so from the previous year, we did a whole lot more weddings this year. We did more than double weddings this year than we did last year. And when I was working with a business coach consultant earlier this year, she said, just ride the trend, and we did. And it really worked out for us. So if you see a trend in your business where, I really, really wanted, my UPIC to be the top producing revenue stream, the reality was it wasn't. And so even though I really wanted to, the realistic goal for me was to look at like where the money actually was going to come in and where we were trending with that. So some tips for setting realistic goals. So if you've never done this before, or if you have been in business for years, 4 or 5 years, but you've never really sat down to say like, okay, what are some goals for my business financially for this upcoming season? So there's the approach, it's used across many industries, but it's called the SMART approach. So be very specific with that goal. So we're looking at, for me, when I was looking at UPIC, I went down and said like, okay, our UPIC is open 16 weeks or 18 weeks, whatever it is, we were going to have so many kids workshops, so many sunset U-Picks, and then one flower fest. And so I went really specific to what was my average sales that week, and to get me to that number that I was looking for my U-Pick for 2023. Make it measurable. So give yourself a specific number, attainable, going back to what I was saying before with making sure that you're not going so lofty that you're, sort of not setting yourself on solid foundation. And then realistic or relevant. So the relevant piece to me is also ties into like, does it hit with your, the word morals is coming to, that's not what I'm looking for. Like your, basically like, does it resonate with you? So if you really, really don't like weddings, don't do weddings just because that's where the money's at. That's where I'm getting at. So however that aligns for you internally, I don't think morals is right, but we'll find the word later. And then time-based. So is it realistic within that time frame? So using these sort of guidelines to just run it through as a check, I always go back to mine with like, okay, is this something that is realistic for me to do? And always going back to like the weather piece. So take inventory of resources and threats, time, motivation, information, funding, support to hit that specific goal, whatever it is. And any time we're adding a new enterprise to our farm or our business, it is one more thing to manage. So even perfect example of this is even this spring, I opened my flower stand and I thought, this is going to be so easy. Like I'm just putting up a building and people are going to come. And that was just very Lyndsay-like of me to think. But it was a whole other piece of energy that it took to manage this thing. Signage, inventory, keeping track of the consignment to pay out vendors on the first of each month, and training my customers as a new location to go. And so it actually took a whole lot of Lyndsay resources to get this easy, simple thing going. Even though in the long run, this is going to be like the long term, this is going to be great for us, but it really is just something else when you're looking at adding a new part of your business. Even just locking the thing up at night. I am already annoyed enough that I have to lock up my chickens every night, and now I have to lock up the flower stand. So flower stand got added to the list. So here's an example of this. Okay, so I'm just going to give you this right here. We're looking at just wholesale accounts. Okay, wholesale accounts only. So that's the little piece of the puzzle we're looking at here. Grocery retail bouquets. So we sell, I write down who we sell to, how many weeks, what's the revenue per week, and what's my annual revenue going to be. So my wholesale chunk is going to be 48,000. That's what my goal is for the year. I know consistently that these people are going to buy from us this many weeks. This year we got a bonus. We sold to an apple orchard, and then 2 of our retail outlets sold that were selling for 15 weeks, ended up selling for close to 20. And then we're still selling to florists. And so that's been really, but that right there it gives me what feels like a safe way. I take this same strategy and I apply it to every revenue stream. So this is what I look at. I look at my 2023 current, and then I do projected for 2024, where I want to be. And this is going to be shifting for me a little bit for next year, but I think you can even see some of the trends that I see, that the U-Pick is down from 23 to 24. I'm actually projecting the U-Pick to be down. I'm projecting workshops to be down, just based off of some personal stuff that I think how we're changing our business and stuff moving forward into 2024. So temporarily. So, all right, that's top line. That's this is my high level number. This is what I want to hit. And prior to that, when I was telling you, when I was able to double that top line revenue, that was simply from me looking at where did I have opportunity to grow this business. And it really helped me to see that on paper, to say like, okay, if that's where I hit, then I need to move to my expense category. I think the expense category personally is the most important piece of this puzzle. So budgeting for expenses, I always get asked this, but what does it cost to run a 6-figure farm? Like on the podcast, it's like one of the most popular questions are like, what do you pay yourself? What does it cost to run a farm? And I always give like a really disappointing answer that like I just can't tell you. But the truth is that it really depends on you. Like you are in control of all of this. And I really think that's a super empowering answer, because you can hit 6 figures, you can hit more than that, and you can pay yourself as much as you flip and want. And I think that one thing that makes this budgeting piece so interesting, and when I've consulted with people or helped people work on their budget, is that we all come from different backgrounds and different families and upbringings, and we all bring different financial baggage into it. Some of us grew up in a home where we were strapped for cash all the time, and so you run a real tight ship and you're penny pinching, and some people didn't want for a thing, and so they spend a whole lot of money, or you reverse those things and the habits are the same. So I think that's what makes this really an interesting piece to navigate. So I want to talk about the 4 categories of just general expenses. So we've got variable expenses, which are things like electric, fuel, water, seeds, fertilizer. We have a fixed. I'm eyeballing because I think my mom is coming down the hill right now to give me a hug. Bless her heart. She doesn't know I'm on a call. So fixed. Hang on a second. Oh, so sorry. Mama's been given lots of hugs lately. So the fixed income, fixed expenses, which things are going to be like rent and mortgage, internet, the things that just don't change from time to time. The intermittent, so this would be like emergencies that come up, repairs, vehicle registration, cooler repair. That was one that, I kind of have this like fixed, this little like category of intermittent emergency fund. And then discretionary. So this would be like non-essential things like meals, travel, those like extra expenses that are just really not, necessary pieces. So some examples of general expenses would be in my categories of that worksheet that I showed you, where I had continuing education in here. This would be an example of where I would want you to break out those expenses. Advertising and marketing, continuing ed. So things like this, or if you pay for a membership to somewhere, ASCFG, payroll, insurance, legal, professional fees. So an accountant would go in there. Bouquet supplies, rent if you lease your farm, van if you have a van, bank fees, meals and entertainment, utilities, all those type of things go under general expenses. And then cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold are the next category of expenses that we're always looking at. And this would be a direct cost of producing the goods that are sold. And I got really hung up with accounting because it didn't make sense to me. And I felt like I needed to sort of have an understanding of it. So I honestly am telling you from a place of, if I could figure this out, you absolutely can figure it out. It is just categorizing expenses that you are spending. And it is solely for me. It is for you to know where your money's going. Your accountant doesn't care. I went into it like, oh my gosh, my accountant, I got to do the accounting. I got to do this perfect. I heard the expression crap in, crap out, and it was like, if you're putting, not good data into QuickBooks, you're not going to get good data that you can rely on afterwards. So it made me really anxious, and the perfectionism in me just lost my mind over it. And I thought, Lyndsay, you are overanalyzing this. And somebody said, no, this is for you. Like, this information's for you. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I started tracking my accounting based off of what information I needed to run my business. And so when it comes to the cost of goods, so all of my income accounts, so the little pie chart, if you see that pie chart and you see UPIC, I have an offsetting cost of goods sold for the UPIC. So I am looking at what did that piece of the pie bring in, and what did that piece of that pie eat up? And so if a direct correlation in there to look at. And if you're doing this on a piece of paper, it's as simple as highlighters. That's how I started. I bought a really big pack of highlighters, and I was looking at, pink was UPIC, expense, income, expense. And I was going through and just marking them off. Super simple. So for creating a budget, and again, going back to this simplicity piece. So to create a budget, you create a budgeted amount of money for each category of expense. So I went through, and if you have QuickBooks, it prints it off for you. I printed off, I have it right over here in my drawer. I do it every single year. It is a stack this big. And I go through every single expense that I had for the year. Sounds crazy, but it helps me look at what category did I spend money that I really didn't. And it gives me this mindset sort of all through the year of like, that's money that's out of my pocket at the end of the year, because my income comes from what that bottom line is. And so I look through those expenses, and I go and say like, okay, last year I spent $10,500 on job supplies and materials. And I'm thinking, holy crap, what did I spend at Tractor Supply? So you're going back through, and I write all those things out. Where was that a necessary expense? Certain years I know that I might be looking through those categories, and I'm looking to see like, where can I reduce those expenses? Where do I need to budget more money in, for an example? So we have a plant section in my expenses. So each year I'm adding in, where we're adding in shrubbery. It's a really big expense, depending on what your investment is. And I'm budgeting for next year, maybe $5,000 to $8,000 to give myself to spend on that investment. And so building that into my budget, then I can kind of each month I'm checking in to see like, where have I spent and where do I need to cut back? Fixed and variable expenses, there's a lot less flexibility. Things like mortgage, unless you rent from your parents and you want to just beg them for, cheaper rent, good luck. Intermittent discretionary things where we're spending money like meals, Starbucks runs, things like that. We do have a Starbucks, believe it or not. So here's when I'm looking at that. So I look at my total sales numbers, and then from there, I'm looking at my total expenses. I'm going through each category of my expense, and I am creating a budgeted number off of that. So creating good habits in this really just gives you the power back to you, and being consistent to managing expenses. Each month, sitting down and looking at these things, it gives you time to react. And I personally think this is something that you can't afford not to prioritize. I was wasting tens of thousands of dollars that was just throwing money at a problem because I could, and then it started looking at, it made me a better farmer, because I was looking at, how do I manage soil health without buying $4,000 worth of compost every year? And, how do I become more efficient, and how do I reach these top line goals with not hiring more staff? And do I still have the current resources to manage my farm and make those changes? So it's helped me to manage my farm in a different way. And I want to say very kindly that when we're telling ourselves that it's overwhelming, just quit telling yourself that. And I realized that I was creating this story in my mind that I couldn't, accounting was the only class that I transferred and went to Columbus State and transferred that credit into Ohio State because I struggled with it. It did not make sense to me. And I kept telling myself that I wasn't good at it. I wasn't good at it. And the only thing that was wrong was that I was telling myself I wasn't good at it. I just needed to dig in and take really small bites at this. So I'm telling you this only because if you're sitting here thinking, I don't know where to start, I'm happy to help you, but go back to this presentation. It's going to be on YouTube. Go back to this thing, watch it, start at the beginning and build the blocks off of that. And I promise you, you will get there. So here's what I do on a weekly basis, just to give you like an overall, just like what are the habits that I have. I look at my profit and loss report every week. And so I'm looking at my P&L to see, is there anything that looks out of whack? Did an expense get categorized into something that shouldn't have been? Cash flow is the other thing. So there's lots of fancy spreadsheets you can get. I honestly just look at my bank statements and I jot numbers down, and I'm looking at like, what did it look like last year? What did it look like this year? And then, again, this is something that it just takes a little bit of time, but we have a very, I say our business runs off of the way our cash flow. If you look at our cash flow and you put it up against a chart of grass, the way the grass grows, it peaks up in the spring and then it kind of flat lines. We're still cutting the stupid crap, during the summer. We're still getting some, but then it really peaks back up later in the year. And then it just flat lines and it goes completely away during the winter. And so that, to me, when I'm looking at that, it helps me to manage how I'm moving money around within my business, and knowing that I'm going to need that to live off of and pay employees off in January, February, March, when the income isn't there as much. And then monthly. So I'm sitting down monthly, I'm looking at payroll reports, and then this is where I'm looking at my budget to actual. So I am looking at, this is what I said I was going to spend, and then this is what I've actually spent. So I can kind of keep track of that. And that, to me, monthly has been okay. I tried to do it weekly. Shannon, who I do the podcast with, I think her and Judd do budget to actual every week, and I just didn't really notice much change for me. And so I look at it monthly. So how to keep this plan in place during a busy season. So I am always reevaluating this information. Is it still serving me to track this information? I used to, we used to do very specific, I would try to get down to like how much money a particular flower is making. I was doing it with a whole bunch of crops. I got overwhelmed with it. And so we only do enterprise budgets, which I'm not talking about here today, but we do them on like a particular crop if I'm very curious about, how much money is that crop making us. And then if you're in this and something falls off, so if you're doing harvest sheets or something, you quit doing it for a while, ask yourself why. Does it need a new process? Is it not necessary for you? What was it that you needed help with to have that process still kind of to kick in and still work for you? Do you want printed sheets, handwritten sheets? That still works for us in a lot of ways with our harvest sheets, our shrink sheet. We've tried digital methods. You've got the whole Android, Apple thing. Not everybody communicates sometimes. So we just use printed sheets for a lot of stuff. I think it's very simple. We put it into a digital format that I can use later. Delegation. I realized that I was mostly the problem. So then if you just delegate it to people, then usually it happens. And pivoting. So again, this is going back to, if something isn't working for you, just pivot and figure out what it is. Why did you fall off track? The habit for me with my finances, Monday is my financial day. I'm always looking at it then. I can get a snapshot of what we sold at the farmer's market for the weekend. A lot of times I have a clearer head from the weekend on Mondays to just get going with looking at my financial stuff. Small bites. This is where I'm saying don't sit here and think you're going to go from, starting a harvest sheet to sales projections in a year, this, in 2 months, sorry, give yourself a long time, a year, to get this all going. Add it in as you can. Those are some apps down there of things that I've used that I find helpful. And so I think this is almost it. So some tips for success with this. So when I grew up as a kid, my parents would say to us, if we were at the mall or wanted something, my mom would say, is it a want or is it a need? And, we would always say, like, it's a need. And, my mom would say, I think that's a want. If it's a need, I'll buy it for you. If it's a want, you need to buy it for yourself. And so I sort of took this same approach with my business. So was it something that I wanted? Did I need it? And so I approached everything that we're going to be purchasing, whether it's a big purchase, or even down to as simple as like, buying some new wheelbarrows. Things are not cheap. Okay. So when you have multiple employees and we have an upper farm and a lower farm, it becomes really expensive. Wheelbarrows could just be a $300 or $400, expense. So celebrate the small wins. So if you keep track for 4 weeks of your harvest sheets, like, celebrate those wins for yourself, because it's really important to keep it going. You're going to see the benefits of this. I am not an exception. I promise you, if you were doing this budgeting and looking at your expenses and really just giving yourself the confidence and the grace to screw it up, that you're going to see more money back into your pocket. We're continuing to trend that same direction every year. And from last year, haven't completed obviously 23's number, but from 22 to 23, our profit margin doubled, bottom line. And so for us, it's only because this is my focus on, where we're at and cutting it out. Find an accountability buddy, put your blinders on. And I say this because we live in a very visual world, social media, and you're farming for you. So grow the crops that make sense for you, and ditch what doesn't. If you don't want to do weddings, but you hear people on podcasts, and you aren't going to hear talk on my podcast selling weddings. You say, oh, it's so much money. You can make so much money. You can, but you got to love what you're doing. And if you don't love what you're doing and it doesn't light you up in your business, it's not worth doing. So, and then this is the last thing. I think this is the last thing. Let's go forward and see. Oh, it's an overview, but yes. Okay. So the last thing, I'm just going to pose a question to you, but what are you doing right now that if you stopped it, it would help you in your business? And let me give you an example of this. So, if you maybe you only spend 30 minutes a day on your phone, but maybe you spend 2 hours. I have that little fancy, screen time thing that they share on Apple. To me, is like the most devastating thing I've ever seen in my life. But if you were to cut out 30 minutes of your screen time a day for an entire year, you would gain 23 work days back. And so that's just a small example. What if you stopped telling yourself you couldn't do this, and you gave yourself that 30 minutes back into your business, and you're gaining yourself 23 work days in that. And so just think about it. Maybe it's not your cell phone. Maybe it's, you sleep in, you need to get up 30 minutes earlier, an hour earlier. I don't know what the thing is for you, whatever your thing is. Maybe it's comparing yourself to other farms. But if you stopped doing that, what is that thing? And just to ponder that when it comes to your budget. And maybe it's stopped spending money on a particular thing, buying plugs. I don't know, maybe you inventory it and you cut back on seeds, whatever the thing may be. So here's just we'll do a quick overview here. So creating a solid foundation, no fuss record keeping. If you're fussing over these things, let's talk, let's make them more simple for you. Because it is the foundation that helps build all of this other stuff from there. Set yourself some realistic goals with sales projections, And again, if you're struggling with those, go back to those slides and look at like, what can you take from this? Creating a simple budget, either on Excel or in QuickBooks. And start small with your habits. They're going to give you power and control within your business, and you're going to feel so much better that you don't have your head in the sand. And then looking at a year-end analysis. So I didn't really talk about this in here, but I look through everything all at the end. So I look through, did I hit my top line? And I'm looking at why I didn't. And looking at where did I, hit within my finances. And that information is what I move into 2024 with. So just giving yourself an overview, and then reward yourself for sticking to this and, paying yourself a really reasonable salary that makes it worth doing all of this. And that is it. There's where you can find me. And my podcast. I have a podcast every week with my friend Shannon. We talk about all this kind of stuff, some shenanigans. But yeah, I think that's the last slide. Yes, it is. So questions, were there questions that came in, Alexis? Anybody have questions? I know we've probably.
Yeah, we've got one, and you all are welcome to unmute yourself, but if you want to type them in the chat box. We have one so far that is curious about considering startup expenses or thinking about adding new revenue streams. How do you decide to invest in a new project or more infrastructure?
Yeah. So the startup cost piece, and everybody runs their farm very differently. So I know somebody that honestly took out $1 million loan, $1 million to start a farm. No joke, in Ohio, doing vegetables, flowers, all the things. That's one of those things when I talk about what's life-giving and what's life like sucking, to me, that sounds terrible. I took a chunk of money. When I started, I took 10 grand. I'm just transparent. I took 10 grand out of my savings, and that's what I started my farm with. And I did not say this in here, but I say it often on the podcast, is that separate your personal finances from your business finances. It's the best thing you can ever do for yourself. I took that $10,000 and that's what I made. I said, that's what I'm going to make this farm work off of. I did not reinvest money into it. So I will tell you though, when I looked at the flower stand, I looked at my overall budgeted expenses for the year. And I said, here's what I'm projecting that I spend. And then here's what's left over of that. And I also looked at cash flow. So since I've been doing this, I look at like what estimated cash flow. And my goal when I did the flower stand was, okay, I said, I want to spend X amount of money for the total project. And that was $18,000 is what it ended up being. I said, I want to spend no more than $20,000. And so I looked at I went to the bank and said, if I'm going to get a loan for this, what do I have to spend per month, to cover that loan? What do I need to bring in per month? And I already knew that our flower stand, which was like the crappiest flower stand you've ever seen, it was a cooler in a 3-sided building next to my trash can, was making enough at the time to cover the flower stand. I thought, oh, okay, then we're okay to do that. But I would have still had that exact same process and done that to say, if I'm making an investment, that example was an investment that is going to make me money. But you would need to look at your expenses to something like purchasing a tractor, for example, to say am I going to be making enough that covers that payment? I gave an example on the podcast a couple years ago. I think it just said this, but that I was looking to do a seed starting house, and it was, in my opinion, very expensive. And so I opted to not spend, 12 grand or whatever it was going to be we talk about that energy exchange I was talking about there earlier, to have to heat it, to have to go in and worry about it multiple times to check these seedlings. I grow seedlings inside fairly well. I mean, well enough to run a business. And so I decided to take a couple grand and make some upgrades to our seed starting house that we have inside instead of spending that. So that was how I looked at it financially. It was like, man, that was a ton of money. The other thing I ran into was in the fall, you know, we all as farmers go through this like, oh my gosh, where is the money? Like, it's never going to come. It's never going to come. And then your accountant's like, oh, hey, you need to spend money, you know, and we go, it's literally within months of each other. And so having that understanding of when that cash flow was going to come in it's helped me to kind of make some decisions. So.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite podcast and or book related to this topic?
Podcast. I mean, my podcast. No. Book. Yes. Profit First book is amazing. I also really like Atomic Habits. It's not a farming book. It's a very popular book. But Atomic Habits, I think, really applies here because it takes a very simple process for any habit forming. It talks about how we form these habits. And I read that book kind of simultaneously with this process when I was doing it. I found it very helpful. But Profit First to me is how I also learned to like manage cash flow and profitability within my business. And so that would be a book. Podcast, I'd have to think about offhand, but I can get back to you guys on that.
I can definitely agree with Profit First. For what it's worth, that was game changer for business. Okay, so you know the cost of your products and where your pricing needs to be to generate a profit. Do you get pushback, such as at the farmer's market, because other vendors there may be pricing too low, or maybe they're just lower than you for some reason, they're a hobby farmer, or they just have less inputs? How do you talk to customers about this, or do you?
I don't. So I will tell you at my farmer's market, I am one of 6 who sell flowers. I am the most expensive, and we sell almost every single week. And that is not, I don't mean that from an arrogant standpoint. It's that I know what it costs to run my farm and to produce quality product. We were directly across, a couple, I don't know, like a month ago, we were directly across from another flower farm that was selling it for half what we were selling it for, and we sold out. I think you are always going to have a customer who gravitates towards cheap and somebody who gravitates towards quality. And I don't even have that conversation. You know, if it comes up, I had a friend of mine that has a farm like an hour from me, and he said that he messaged me and said he had a customer complaining about a $15 bouquet, and that it was just like really small. It looked bigger. It really looked bigger when they were all in the same bucket. And I wrote him back and I said, well, tell him to buy the whole bucket. And I said, if he drives an hour east, he'll be paying $25 to pick him his own. So, it really comes down to like, what do you need to run your business? And I don't get too hung up in that stuff.
So you mentioned consulting. Tell us more. Michelle has taken Cornell's ag accounting class, but would like help with chart of accounts and some other specific flower things for like QuickBooks.
Yeah, sure. I do. It's on my website. You can go to my website. I think it's under like work with me or something like that. But I do one-on-one Zoom stuff prior to the consulting. I have you come to me with like kind of what it is. We chat beforehand, so it's very like concentrated when we work together, and then we set goals for that that time together. And then if you have a more specific goal or you want more than just an hour, you can shoot me an email. It's hello@wildrootflowerco.com, and I will get back to you when I can. But yeah, we do it via Zoom, and then you get to keep it and share my records and stuff with you.
Cindy has just posted in the chat your website, and that sounds very efficient and on par for you. I love your bulleted brain, the way your brain works.
Yeah, my boyfriend is an engineer, and so that just means he explains everything, and so he knows how to I just want the cliff notes. Just give me the cliff notes, and I'll do it.
Bullet points, please.
Yep.
Yes, excellent. Any other questions in the chat while we wait for those? Savannah, I know you had a really cool survey that you wanted to chat about.
Yeah, just really quick, for those that don't know me, my name is Savannah Columbia. I'm an extension associate in the University of Kentucky's Ag Econ department. And I am working on my master's thesis this fall and spring, which is centered around workshops for cut flower growers. But let me rephrase that. Workshops that growers put on for consumers. We are interested in obtaining what consumers find most appealing about attending workshops, things that can help growers facilitate better workshops. Not that they're doing bad workshops, but like the best way that they can appeal to consumers, willingness to pay, all the kind of fun economic things like that. But part of what I need some of your all's help for is to gather some insight on consumers, which I think will just be in the form of maybe you all, people, cut flower growers that are hosting workshops, sending along our survey link. Our survey will be, consumers that answer the survey will be reimbursed, or not reimbursed, but financially, what is the word that I'm looking for? They'll get money for taking the survey. Rewarded.
Compensated.
So there is a piece of the pie in it for consumers that are willing to compensated. Yes. There's a piece of the pie for consumers, and obviously all of the information I gather from the survey, from the consumer's point of view, anything that's in my thesis will obviously be available for you all growers to use, once I finish typing it up. But I just posted a link in the chat. It's just a simple Qualtrics survey. It's just your first and last name, your farm name, and your email address. Totally voluntary. If you want to maybe help participate, or even if you just want information, you don't have to commit to anything. We're right now just in the process of looking for cut flower workshop hosts that would like to help facilitate the survey. And if you have any questions, I can put my email in the chat, but just an interest form really at this point. So thank you.
So if you want a piece of your pie that you're going to have on your wonderful records now, thank you, Lyndsay, a beautiful pie chart to include workshops, and you need more details about figuring out if that's going to work for you, sign up to help Savannah out, helps you out, helps us all out. We would greatly appreciate it. Lyndsay, we had one last question come in, and it was, if you have any advice for a person starting out in 2024 on their own.
Oh, advice. Financial, keep it to financial advice. Keep it simple. Just, it would be the record keeping. I would just say that was one thing that I wished I had done from the beginning, was tracking my harvest sheets and my shrink sheets and keeping just really good detailed records, because it's going to help you moving forward. And yeah, just keep it simple. Don't overanalyze. Be kind to yourself. That's the biggest thing. It's a hard, you're learning how to grow and run a business. I had no idea when I started this how much business was in this. Lucky for me, I like that side of it. But I didn't realize that in the beginning. So just good records, keep good records.
And try not to spend $400 at Tractor Supply, because that I felt in my bones because recently, yes.
Chicken feed. Don't get chickens. That's my advice. Don't get chickens. Tell me they're expensive.
They will eat things. Just another reminder, Cindy has posted in the chat box about that cut flower short course that we posted up front of everything. It's going to be a really great time. I'm not just saying that because I'm presiding. It's going to be a great time. and you're going to learn a lot of awesome things and get to, you know, really connect with some people. If you want to see these other short courses that have been videotaped, or like Lyndsay said, you want to be able to jump back and watch this again to be like, wait, how did she set up her shrink sheet, or whatever it is, and all the other really excellent resources that we have. You can find those at the Center for Crop Diversification. We refer to that as CCD if you've heard that around. Josh has posted a link to that if you're not familiar in the chat. So highly recommend checking all those out. There's videos. I mean, if you want to know how to install drip irrigation, there's a really great video on there. You need to know what preservation to put in your water for certain cut flowers, or if you can keep them in the cooler. That kind of great stuff is on there, and you can watch all of the short courses that we have done. So we're really grateful for that excellent resource up there. But Lyndsay, thank you so much for being with us tonight. If I missed anybody, Bethany, Josh, Cindy, Dakota, anything else I needed to throw in here before we release the hounds to go set up their QuickBooks? Hearing none. Thank you, Lyndsay, so much. And I hopefully will get some consulting thrown your way, and all of us. I have a page full of notes on all of the things that I need to do. So shrink sheets are on that. And we really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, everybody have a great night. You will be getting a video link with this once it is inputted up onto YouTube. And again, you can find it on that CCD website. So everyone have a great night. Thanks for being here with us.